The distress signal came from a dead world. Not dying, dead. Zh'kaar had seen the preliminary scans 3 times, each more impossible than the last. The planet's southern hemisphere was gone. Not damaged, not wounded, but erased. Replaced by a crater so massive it had fractured the tectonic plates beneath. The atmosphere was choked with debris. The surface temperature had dropped 40 degrees in a matter of days. Every biological model predicted total extinction within a solar cycle. And yet, the signal kept pulsing. Not automated, not a beacon left behind by the departed. It was active. Someone was down there. Someone was calling. "It's a trap," Counselor Rex hissed, his chitinous plates rattling with agitation, "or a malfunction. Nothing could survive down there. Nothing should be down there." But Zh'kaar's tendrils were already picking up something else in the data streams. Energy signatures. Lots of them. Construction equipment. Fusion reactors coming online, transport ships descending through that poisoned atmosphere like moths drawn to a flame they should fear. And footsteps. Hundreds of them. Thousands. The heavy, rhythmic impacts of humans walking on a world that should be abandoned. "They're not evacuating," Zh'kaar whispered, his voice barely registering on the translation matrix. "They're arriving." The council chamber fell silent. In the observation window behind them, the wounded planet rotated slowly, its massive scar visible even from orbit, a wound that could be seen across star systems. A death sentence written in cooling magma and shattered stone. And on its surface, lights were beginning to glow in the darkness. Zh'kaar felt something he hadn't experienced in his 3 centuries of life. True confusion mixed with something sharper. Something that made his sensory organs tingle with anticipation. What were the humans doing down there? And more importantly, why? We need to speak with them now, before we make any assumptions about what we're seeing. Because Ambassador Zh'kaar had learned one thing in his 3 cycles of studying humanity. When humans did something that made no logical sense, it was usually because they understood something the rest of the universe had forgotten, or never known at all. The first thing Ambassador Zh'kaar noticed about humans was that they walked wrong. They didn't glide like the Velsheen, whose magnetic fields let them drift across metal floors with the grace of falling leaves. They didn't skitter with the efficient 8-legged precision of the Krixtal. They certainly didn't ripple through corridors like the gelatinous Coom, who could compress their bodies into any available space. No, humans stomped. Each footfall was a small impact, a controlled collision with the ground that sent vibrations through the deck plating. Zh'kaar's sensory tendrils picked up every jarring step as Commander Sarah Chen approached the observation deck where the Council of United Species had gathered. The humans' boots, such primitive coverings really, struck the floor with what seemed like unnecessary force. "They're trying to intimidate us," Counselor Vorix hissed, his chitinous plates rattling with agitation. "Or malfunction. Nothing could survive down there. Nothing should be down there." But Zh'kaar's tendrils were already picking up something else in the data streams. Energy signatures. Lots of them. Construction equipment. Fusion reactors coming online, transport ships descending through that poisoned atmosphere like moths drawn to a flame they should fear. And footsteps. Hundreds of them. Thousands of them. The heavy, rhythmic impacts of humans walking on a world that should be abandoned. "They're not evacuating," Zh'kaar whispered, his voice barely registering on the translation matrix. "They're arriving." The council chamber fell silent. In the observation window behind them, the wounded planet rotated slowly, its massive scar visible even from orbit, a wound that could be seen across star systems. A death sentence written in cooling magma and shattered stone. And on its surface, lights were beginning to glow in the darkness. Zh'kaar felt something he hadn't experienced in his 3 centuries of life. True confusion mixed with something sharper, something that made his sensory organs tingle with anticipation. What were the humans doing down there? And more importantly, why? We need to speak with them, now, before we make any assumptions about what we're seeing. Because Ambassador Zh'kaar had learned one thing in his 3 cycles of studying humanity. When humans did something that made no logical sense, it was usually because they understood something the rest of the universe had forgotten. Or never known at all. The first thing Ambassador Zh'kaar noticed about humans was that they walked wrong. They didn't glide like the Velsheen, whose magnetic fields let them drift across metal floors with the grace of falling leaves. They didn't skitter with the efficient 8-legged precision of the Krixtal. They certainly didn't ripple through corridors like the gelatinous Coom, who could compress their bodies into any available space. No. Humans stomped. Each footfall was a small impact, a controlled collision with the ground that sent vibrations through the deck plating. Zh'kaar's sensory tendrils picked up every jarring step as Commander Sarah Chen approached the observation deck where the Council of United Species had gathered. The humans' boots, such primitive coverings really, struck the floor with what seemed like unnecessary force. "They're trying to intimidate us," Counselor Vrex hissed, his chitinous plates rattling with agitation. "Or a malfunction. Nothing could survive down there. Nothing should be down there." But Zh'kaar wasn't so sure. He'd been studying humans for 3 cycles now, ever since their rattling ships had emerged from the outer rim with their crude fusion drives and absolutely barbaric translation protocols. There was something about the way they moved that suggested purpose, intention, not aggression, but something entirely different. Commander Chen entered the chamber, and Zh'kaar noticed something he'd seen before, but never truly processed. She was sweating. Tiny droplets of moisture beaded on her forehead despite the climate-controlled environment. The Velsheen maintained perfect homeostasis. The Krixtal could survive temperature variations of over 300 degrees. Even the fragile Coom could simply adjust their internal chemistry to match their environment. But humans leaked. "Honored Council," Chen said, her voice rough compared to the crystalline tones of the Velsheen or the melodic harmonics of the Coom. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "We agreed to nothing," Counselor Vrex snapped. "The emergency beacon you activated gave us little choice. Now explain why you summoned us to this unremarkable system on the edge of colonized space." Chen's face did that strange thing human faces did, muscles pulling in different directions, creating what they called an expression. This one Zh'kaar had learned was called a smile, though it didn't look particularly pleasant at the moment. "Because," Chen said, "we found something you need to see. And more importantly, something you need to understand about how we see the universe." She gestured to the observation window. Beyond it, a planet rotated slowly. A standard terrestrial world, nothing remarkable about it except for the massive wound across its southern hemisphere. A crater that must have measured 800 kilometers across, its edges still glowing with residual heat from whatever impact had created it. 3 days ago, Chen continued, an asteroid struck this world, the Zephyr Colony. Population, 43,000. Mixed species, Velsheen, Krixtal, Coom, and yes, about 3,000 humans. "A tragedy," Zh'kaar said, extending his tendrils in the traditional gesture of mourning. "But such impacts, while rare, are not unprecedented. The colony should have had detection systems." They did. The asteroid was detected 6 months ago. Plenty of time to evacuate. Every ship in the sector was rerouted to assist. By the time of impact, the colony was completely empty. Everyone survived. Varex's plates rattled with confusion.
Then why have you brought us here? To show us an evacuation success story? No. Chen's face faded. I brought you here to show you what humans did after the evacuation. She tapped a control panel, and the view shifted to the planet's northern hemisphere, where there should have been pristine wilderness or perhaps some scattered settlements. There was instead a construction site that made even Zh'kaar's usually calm demeanor falter. Thousands of structures, prefabricated habitats arranged in careful grids, power generators, water reclamation facilities, agricultural domes, and in the center, something that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. A monument.
A massive sculpture of intertwined figures from different species, reaching toward the sky. I don't understand, the Coom representative burbled, its translation device struggling with its confusion. Why would you... The planet is ruined. The crater has destabilized the tectonic plates. The debris in the atmosphere will block sunlight for decades. This world is a loss. To you, maybe, Chen said, and now her voice carried something that made Z'Kaar's tendrils quiver. Not anger, something fiercer, something that burned like a star's core. But humans have a saying, home is where you make it. Those 43,000 people, they don't want to be refugees on someone else's world. They want to go back. So we're making that possible. Madness, Rex spat. The resources required to terraform a world in such condition, the time, the technology, the sheer stubbornness of it. 3 generations, Chen said simply. That's our estimate. 3 generations until the atmosphere clears, the temperatures stabilize, and life can flourish again. The people we evacuated, most of them won't live to see it completed, but their children will. Their grandchildren will. And when they set foot on that world again, they'll be home. Z'Kaar felt something shift in his understanding. You're doing this, knowing you'll never see the results? That's what humans do. Chen walked to the window, pressing one hand against the transparent aluminum. Her palm left a slight smudge, more evidence of their constant biological leakage. You know what's funny? The other species think we're weak. We can't survive temperature extremes like the crystal. We don't have built-in weapons like the Velshine's electrical discharge. We can't regenerate like the Coom. We're slow, we're fragile, and we die if we go more than a few days without water. She turned back to face them, and Z'Kaar finally understood what he'd been sensing in her movements all along. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't intimidation. It was... wait. But we come from a world with gravity that would crush half the species in this council. A world that tried to kill us with ice ages and volcanic eruptions and solar radiation. A world where we were prey before we were predators, where we had to earn every single day of survival. And you know what we learned? We learned that you don't give up, ever. You fall, you get back up. And when you can't get up anymore, you drag yourself forward on your belly until you can. Every step we take, every breath we draw, every single moment we exist is us fighting against a universe that wants us dead. And we're too stubborn to stop. Chen pulled up another display. Medical scans, Zh'kaar realized. Human medical scans. This is Dr. James Walsh. He's 73 years old. In human terms, that's ancient. Our lifespans are laughably short compared to yours. He has a degenerative neural condition. He'll be dead in 5 years, maybe less. He was part of the Zephyr Colony, had a nice retirement set up there, lost everything in the evacuation. Another tragedy, Zh'kaar murmured. He was on the first ship back, landed 3 days after the impact while the crater was still glowing. He's down there right now, setting up the agricultural research station. When I asked him why, you know what he said? Because someone has to. And I've got 5 years. That's 5 years of data I can collect. 5 years of soil samples and atmospheric readings and crop experiments. 5 years to make sure the next generation has a better chance. She swiped to another display. A Velshine juvenile, her electromagnetic field still weak and unstable. This is Soterin. She's 6 years old. Human colonists found her family's settlement destroyed by the shockwave. They'd been living too far from the main colony to get the evacuation notice. Their parents didn't make it. She did. And you know what the humans did? They took her in, taught her their language, their customs, made her part of their families. She calls 4 different humans aunt or uncle now. Cultural contamination, Rex protested weakly. Cultural survival, Chen countered. Because when we go back to that planet in 3 generations, Soterin will be there. She'll be old by Velshine standards, maybe, but she'll be there. And she'll teach her children and grandchildren about how humans and Velshine rebuilt a world together. How we looked at a crater that could be seen from orbit and said, "Not today, universe, not today." Zh'kaar found himself moving closer to the window, his tendrils pressed against the cool surface. Below, on that wounded world, he could see the lights. Thousands of lights scattered across the construction sites. People working through the night because the day-night cycle had been thrown off by the impact, because the work couldn't wait, because every moment mattered. "You asked me once," Zh'kaar said quietly, "why humans always look so tired, why we're always pushing ourselves, always working, always moving forward even when it makes no logical sense. This is why." She gestured to the planet, to the lights, to the monument that would stand for centuries. "We're tired because we know something the rest of you haven't figured out yet. We know that the universe doesn't care about us. It's not malevolent, it's not cruel, it's just indifferent. Entropy doesn't care about your feelings. Asteroids don't check if anyone's home before they hit. Black holes don't apologize for eating stars. The universe is a vast, cold machine that will grind on long after every species in this council is dust and forgotten memory." The observation deck was utterly silent now. Even Rex had stopped rattling. "But here's the thing," Ten continued, and her voice was soft now, intimate, like she was sharing a secret. "We figured out that the universe being indifferent means something really important. It means that we get to choose what matters. It means that when we decide something has value, a planet, a person, a promise, we get to fight for it. And the universe can't stop us. It can make it hard. It can make it take 3 generations. It can kill us before we see the results. But it can't make us give up. Because we decided somewhere in our evolution, somewhere in all those ice ages and volcanic eruptions and predators hunting us in the dark, that we were going to matter. That our existence wasn't going to be a footnote in the universe's story. That when we passed through this reality, we were going to leave marks, footprints, monuments, children who remember our names and carry on our work." Chen turned back to face the council, and Zh'kaar saw something in her eyes that made his biological impossibility of his species' physiology tingle with something like understanding. "You think we walk too loud," she said. "You think we're clumsy and violent and crude. And maybe we are, but every footstep is us telling the universe that we're still here. Every breath is a victory. Every generation is a promise that we will not go quietly into the dark." She pulled up one final image. The monument on the planet's surface, but closer now, detailed enough to see the inscription at its base. Zh'kaar's translation implant struggled with it. The phrase was apparently uniquely human, difficult to render in other languages. "Per Aspera Ad Astra," Chen read out loud. "Through hardship to the stars." That's what humans believe. That's what we've always believed. And it's not about reaching the stars. We've done that. It's about what you go through to get there. It's about looking at a ruined world and seeing a home. It's about losing everything and choosing to build again. It's about dying without seeing your work completed and doing it anyway because it matters. Rex spoke, and his voice had lost its hostile edge. "And if you fail, if the terraforming doesn't work, if the planet remains dead, if 3 generations sacrifice themselves for nothing." Chen's smile returned, but this time it was gentler, sad even. "Then we'll have failed trying," she said, "and we'll have taught our children how to try. And they'll try again somewhere else, some other time. Because that's what humans do. We fall down. We get up. We keep walking.
and every footstep echoes through the universe like thunder saying, "We were here. We mattered. We tried." 3 hours later, Zh'kaar found himself in his quarters reviewing the data from the meeting. The council had agreed to provide resources for the Zephyr restoration project, an unprecedented decision. They'd also agreed to Chen's secondary proposal, a joint research station to study human resilience and adaptation strategies. But it wasn't the data that occupied Zh'kaar's thoughts as he looked out at the wounded planet below. It was the memory of Chen's hand on the window, the smudge her palm had left, the physical evidence of her presence, her passage through space. He extended a tendril and pressed it against his own viewport, but of course, it left no mark. His species didn't leak, didn't sweat, didn't leave traces of their biology scattered wherever they went. And for the first time in his long life, Zh'kaar felt something like envy. Because humans were right. The universe was indifferent. It would grind on. Species would rise and fall. Stars would burn out. Entropy would claim everything in the end. But somewhere on a ruined planet, lights were burning through the night. People were working who would never see the fruits of their labor. A child was learning to call humans family in a language that wasn't her own. And a monument stood in the ash and rubble, promising that something impossible was going to happen. Not because it was logical, not because it was efficient, not because the universe would allow it, but because humans had decided it would. Because they would walk loudly through the cosmos, leaving their heady footprints and their stubborn promises and their ridiculous hope scattered like seeds in their wake. And maybe, just maybe, some of those seeds would grow. Zh'kaar turned away from the window and began drafting his report to the council. He had to choose his words carefully, had to make them understand what he'd witnessed. But how did you explain to species who'd never known real gravity what it meant to fight against it with every step? How did you describe the weight of hope to people who'd never had to carry it? He thought of Chen's words, of Dr. Walsh in his research station counting down his final years in soil samples and atmospheric readings, of young Soteran learning human customs while holding on to her own heritage, and of 43,000 souls who'd looked at a crater and seen home. In the end, he wrote simply, "I have met the humans. They walk like the universe is trying to push them down, and they walk anyway. I think we should pay attention to where they're going." Outside his window, another ship descended toward the planet's surface. More volunteers, more workers, more people choosing the hard path because it was the right one. More footsteps echoing through the cosmos. As Zh'kaar, who had lived for 3 centuries without understanding what it meant to truly live, felt something shift inside him. A pull. A gravity all its own. He looked at the planet one more time, at the lights burning against the dark, at the monument reaching for stars that were hidden behind layers of debris and dust and damage. Per Aspera Ad Astra, he whispered in his own language, letting the words settle into his consciousness like a seed finding soil, through hardship to the stars. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Because humans had decided it would. And sometimes, Zh'kaar was learning, that was enough. That stubborn, impossible, ridiculous human decision to matter in an indifferent universe. Sometimes it was more than enough. It was everything.
The universe remembers in strange ways, sometimes through monuments, sometimes through footsteps, and sometimes through something even humans haven't fully understood yet. What happens when consciousness itself refuses to fade? When memories become something more than electrical impulses? When they evolve? If this story made you think about humanity's refusal to surrender to entropy, then you need to hear what comes next. Watch The Memory Archaeologist, HFY Sci-Fi Story, When Digital Consciousness Evolves Beyond Death, to discover what happens when human stubbornness meets digital immortality, and why some echoes refuse to fade into silence. Because if humans can look at a dead world and see home, what might they see when they look at death itself? Find out. The story continues.